Jesse, so by the time people listen to this episode, we're going to know who won the first ever blocked and reported Super Bowl. Who are you for?
Someone pointed this out to me that I had not even thought of this, because the idea of you watching a football game is like the idea of you treating me kindly. It just doesn't go with Katie.
I am way more likely to watch a football game than to
That's
be
true.
nice to you.
Yeah, it's Seattle, New England. I am actually an ardent New England Patriots fan. I have been for decades.
You are?
Not my fault.
Really?
You knew this.
Huh.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh. I had no idea.
You've never watched the Seahawks game, and you don't care about the Seahawks?
Not in person. I have watched many a football game, or at least in part because I am related to men and boys, and also a few women who watch football. So I watched the last game.
NFC Championship.
The playoffs. Was that okay? I did watch the one with the blue and yellow team.
The Rams.
Yes. And I was very disappointed when the Seahawks won because, one, I hate their colors, and two, I hate Seattle. So I'm for the Pats.
Really? Just like that?
Well, I mean, it's like I'm really torn on this because it's like on the one hand, I want you to be unhappy, but on the other hand, I want all of Seattle to be unhappy. So for me, it's a lose-lose either way.
But Seattle's going to be unhappy no matter what happens. It's Seattle. Although, for that matter, so is New England.
That's a good point.
Not two particularly happy regions. So
this is why I'm a Chiefs fan.
Yeah. Well, again, we don't really know what to say here because the outcome, by the time you hear our voice, New England will have prevailed. Drake May will have thrown for 500 yards, but I guess good luck to both teams or something.
Yeah, whatever.
Before we get into part 2, that's the part we're on of the net neutrality thing?
That's right. 2 of 2. This is the final one. People are finally going to find out what happened with net neutrality. Don't Google it.
Before... no spoilers. Before we get to that, I have a very rare and weird thing, which is I was involved in a missed connection.
No.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
wait. So wait. Let me guess.
Little old me? Oh, yeah. You set the scene. What you think it is.
Okay. You were at a pizza shop.
Yep.
Grease
Correct
dripping
so far.
down your face.
Yep.
Beard covered in sauce. And somebody saw you.
Sauce if we're lucky.
Yeah. And somebody saw you and was like, why is that disabled man? I'm not saying it. Why is that disabled man allowed into this pizza? Somebody find his mother. Somebody find his helper. Was that it?
Wait, where's the misconnection?
It was the person trying to. It was more like an Amber Alert than a misconnection.
Okay, I'm not sure you know what a misconnection is. Okay, this was actually at the Bar Pod gathering in LA on January 31st.
Oh wait! Before you use this, more important.
Yeah.
How was the sandwich?
Oh my God. It's so good. It was so good. I tried to get it again. The timing didn't work out. But the first thing I did when I got to LA is I went to Dune. I was staying in Atwater Village. I went to Dune. And listeners already know this because, as I've said before, this was the most excited I've ever been about anything. Pickled beet sandwich from Dune with the Bulgarian, Katie. Don't fuck this up. The Bulgarian sheep's milk feta. And whatever else.
Okay, thank God it was Bulgarian. I thought maybe it was Greek.
It was like Macedonia, but just slap it out of their hand.
Okay, back to you.
Yeah, so the event was great. We were at a place called the Hermosillo in Highland Park on Saturday, January 31st. And I greet everyone in the back. I go to the bar to get a drink, and this woman comes up to me, and she sort of leans into me in this way I'm not used to. I don't get like hit on aggressively in public, usually. And she points to a projector that's sitting there. It's like an overhead projector you'd use in a school setting that the bar has as part of its decor. And she asked me about it. And I'm sort of like taken aback.
Because she saw you and she was like, you are
a teacher.
The tech guy.
You're the tech guy. Can you? She was the bartender. She's like, can you fix this? And she like sort of leans into me and she's like awkward, but she's like tall and pretty. And I'm like a little bit taken aback. And I assume, because why else would anybody come up and talk to me, that she's with the Bar Pod group.
Right.
And I don't fully engage because I'm trying to order my drink. I'm trying to juggle stuff. I'm like, when I go to the back with my drink, I'll talk to this woman, this tall woman. I never see her again. She just disappears.
Mm-hmm. So not with a crew.
Not with a crew. And that's the whole story. So I need someone to find the woman who's that's it.
That's it?
Hold on.
This is not what I thought at all.
Saturday, she was at the and I'm only doing this. First of all, also, this could just be a drunk and or spectrum-y person with no sense of personal boundaries.
Likely.
But if you know a tall woman who talked to me at January 31st at the Hermosillo in Highland Park, send her my way. Okay, I have no real further description of her because I can't picture faces.
Okay, so you said, to set this up, you said you were a part of a misconnection, which made me think that someone left a misconnection for you somewhere.
No.
This is
No. This
that's
woman
why I
has
didn't
no
believe
idea.
it.
There is no
Okay.
way this woman has any memory of this event either.
Well, okay.
It was I don't know, man. You can understand how I assume she was with the bar pod group.
If she was talking to
the
you,
bar pod
yes.
group, however, was lovely, and we had some very good conversations about various things.
Okay, so if anyone knows any tall women in LA,
Tall women.
email Jesse.
If you know any tall woman in LA, I think she had dirty blonde hair. This will narrow it down. Tall LA, dirty blonde hair, attractive.
possibly blind.
That's probably like only 5 or 10 women, probably blind or otherwise disabled. I didn't see a wheelchair, but
It was a tall one.
okay.
Good luck, Jesse. Good luck.
On to the arguably more important subject of net neutrality, part 2.
So, yes, this is part 2 of our series on net neutrality. And yes, we know there is a lot else going on in the world, but I think it's more important to explain the nuances of this decade-old policy story than to talk about, like, I don't know.
Well, but you say there's other stuff going on in the world. My internet tubes got clogged up by big tech, so I can't even download video of it because there's no net neutrality.
Yes,
right?
I'm sure that happened, yes. This is why the misconnection isn't going to work for you, is because there's no net neutrality. So,
Her tubes are clogged.
Yes. So people might be expecting us to talk about, Jeff Epstein and his emails or the latest developments in the race to replace ourselves with AI bots or whatever's happening with Will Stansel. Not here. If you do want to hear us talk about those things, you can check out our latest Primo episode. But today we are going back to net neutrality. Before we get to the new stuff, I do have a few corrections. Fewer than I thought. I thought there would be the whole show is going to be corrections on this one just because it's so complex.
I think the Vegas over-under on number of corrections for you, no offense, but you doing a tech-heavy story was like 9.5. Is it under 9.5?
It's 3.
Damn it. I had the over. Okay.
I think it's pretty good. And they're small.
Oh, okay.
So I figured, I thought I was going to get flooded with emails about how I flubbed the explanation of peering, whatever that is. The only real corrections I got were one, Tim Wu was at Columbia, not Harvard. AT&T was a de facto monopoly by 1913. I think I said the 1930s. And John Oliver is apparently not short. Huge shock there. Jeff Maurer says that he's 6 feet, which I do have a hard time believing because he is British and John Oliver, but it does explain a bit more about how he got the pretty wife.
One of the first things one of the listeners said to me in the backyard at the Hermosillo was, "You're skinnier than I thought you would be."
You do sound like a short, fat man.
No, I sound like a short, fat woman. Other people have said they were surprised I was a man when they met me with testosterone issues.
Yeah, so apologies to Tim Wu, AT&T, and John Oliver. We stand corrected. There was some good discussion about the episode on our Substack page. It turns out that a number of our listeners know a lot about this issue, and some of them even worked in policy or in big cable when this was happening. So there were some interesting insights there. One guy in particular, he says he worked in telecom. I'm just going to take his word for it. He said that net neutrality sounds good in theory, but if ISPs weren't able to manage and prioritize some traffic, basically throttle some people and not other, then Netflix would start glitching out on Friday nights when millions of teenagers are busy checking out Pornhub's latest offerings. So he was basically saying that customers would actually hate true net neutrality if ISPs weren't allowed to manage traffic at all. So good discussion on the Substack page. This is always a good place for people who want to discuss the episodes. That's a perk for our Primos, by the way. And speaking of Primos, reminder to everyone, personals are due by February 10th. You can look at our Substack page to get the link to submit your personal. And we also have a special treat this year for our bonus Valentine's episode. It's a surprise.
It's a good surprise. I can vouch for that.
Yes, this is going to be fun. All right, Jesse, let's get to part 2.
Wait, one thing though. Someone at the meetup said that I had said, where did we put the thing to submit your personals?
It's on the it's blockchainreported.org and it's pinned to the page. And then there's a Google form within that
Plus
page.
personals are back, baby. That's where they want to click.
Yes.
Submit your personal here. Okay, cool. Yeah, let's get to it.
It's been a week. I would like you to sum up part 1. Do not use notes.
Okay, so this concerned, just the question of whether the big players would be able to control the internet and offer greater speeds than the upstarts and the ma and pop internet content providers. So in the 90s, legislators had decided to not treat internet service providers as common carriers. Common carriers that's what phone companies are, right?
Yep, it's a utility.
It's utility.
And these are heavily regulated. So in the 90s, Bill Clinton and Congress was like, light touch regulation. The internet will flourish without the heavy hand of the government.
Yes. And in the early 2000s, Tim Wu, this internet scholar who wrote a very good book about attention, he coined the term net neutrality, and he argued that ISPs shouldn't be allowed to discriminate, that we should have a fully open internet. And the FCC agreed to have ISPs voluntarily comply with that. So net neutrality was sort of the norm, but not via regulation, right?
But yeah, basically.
Okay. And then a few years later, Comcast throttles BitTorrent, which was this service used to download like movies and games. Totally, I'm sure none of those were instances of piracy or copyright infringement, if memory serves. That was what Wu had warned against because, Comcast is throttling one particular type of internet traffic. That was exactly what Wu had warned against because Comcast is discriminating and throttling one particular type of internet content. I think that's what it's called. In the early 2010s, we had the Arab Spring. Activists realized they could harness the internet to change public policy.
Yeah, so in addition to the Arab Spring and Occupy Wall Street, there were fights against SOPA and PIPA, which were these twin pieces of legislation that were pushed by the recording industry, the motion picture industry, basically enhanced copyright laws. And internet activists very successfully made these sort of the cause du jour. And these tech companies like Wikipedia, Reddit, they actually blacked out for a day in 2012 to encourage their users to contact their congresspeople and make their voices heard. So they really effectively were sort of harnessing the power of the internet to get people motivated.
And John Oliver played a role in this as well, right?
Yes, John Oliver played a very big role in this. He did an episode in 2014 about net neutrality. Unfortunately, got a few things wrong, just a few little things. As we explained last week, the question at the FCC at the time was not if the FCC should end net neutrality. It was whether they should codify it. John Oliver got that wrong. That little mistake aside, his segment went extremely viral. And this was in part thanks to the media. So this was the very beginning of Last Week Tonight. This was their first really big hit. But for many years after this, every time John Oliver would do a show on Monday morning, content slop writers would watch Last Week Tonight clips on YouTube because they couldn't afford HBO or the entire show. They would put the whole show on YouTube and then write short blog posts about how John Oliver destroyed the FCC or destroyed transphobe or destroyed Donald Trump and shit like that. And I wrote many of those posts myself. Were you ever in those particular content mines?
Oh, I'm sure at some point I wrote something along those lines, yeah.
It was very cheap and easy content and it played to the...
Well, just because they're idiots. Like out there, there was other people in the country.
I was.
No,
it's true.
America is full of dumb idiots, and we needed John Oliver to explain how they were idiots, and we needed to help spread the word that they were so dumb. The people.
Do you think it's the accent? Do you think it would have worked if he had just like a New Jersey accent?
Absolutely not.
So that content, it played to the audience's preferences, and posts like that would sometimes go viral, or at least get lots of likes on Facebook. And the fact that Last Week Tonight put entire segments on YouTube was really smart because, yes, people got their content for free, but it spread like wildfire. So within 2 days of that net neutrality episode airing in 2014, the segment had 800,000 views on YouTube, and the FCC was flooded with comments from outraged viewers. The FCC's online commenting system got nearly 45,000 comments. It actually crashed. That led to even more headlines and more comments. But the funny thing is, so friend of the pod, Jeff Maurer, he was a writer at Last Week Tonight. He's been on this show before. He was there at the time. And he told me that they later found out that the FCC website was just really shitty and it crashed all the time. So it might not have had anything to do with these comments. But still, even more tension. And everyone hated Big Cable for good reason. They did suck. They do suck. And everyone wanted an open internet, so this was an obvious cause to get behind. And all you had to do was email the FCC, send them a form letter. This is much easier than coming up with a clever slogan for your protest sign. And net neutrality is specifically difficult to make a clever protest sign. I mean, what the fuck rhymes with it?
And did Jeff realize that there were some perhaps factual issues with the way they covered net neutrality?
Yeah, so I asked him that. And he said, at the time, this is what he said in an email, "Oh God, no, people really kissed our asses at the time. Said we were doing essential and important work. In the years since, especially because the net neutrality switch has been flipped on and off and back on again, and it didn't seem to make much difference, it's clear that we didn't portray things accurately. The thing is, very few reporters or critics were knowledgeable about this issue to see what were the problems with Oliver's segment.
So you're saying this was a situation where John Oliver did a long segment on a complex issue and he got stuff wrong, but there weren't a lot of journalists who were in a position to be able to tell how he got them wrong?
That's what I'm saying, Jesse.
Huh. It seems like that probably could have only happened like once, not multiple. Okay. Anyway.
So there was one journalist who did understand the issue. His name is John Healy. He was at the LA Times. He wrote a piece called John Oliver Finds Humor in Net Neutrality but Loses the Facts. Let me read you a bit of that. There was a grain of truth to his narrative, but Oliver misled his audience badly on a couple of key points. And then he explained the actual FCC proposal at hand, reclassifying broadband as a common carrier. And Healy writes, details, details, details. What you think about net neutrality and the FCC's proposed rule depends in large measure on how hard you want to stick it to the cable companies. And hey, who doesn't despise them and their abysmal customer service? One sure way to get people interested in a mind-numbingly complex public policy issue is to characterize it as a favor to the evil cable guys. So that's how Oliver played it. Of course, this article did not go viral.
It's lucky he wrote that before Blue Sky existed, because he would be probably dead now.
Yeah,
they would have
John Oliver destroys John Healy. So after the Oliver episode aired, internet advocacy groups like Fight for the Future and Free Press seized the moment. They organized an Internet Slowdown Day. It was to be held in September 2014. They had a coalition named Battle for the Net, and this was basically a redo of the SOPA PIPA blackout of 2012. We talked about that in the last episode. So this was when parts of the internet went dark in protests against those two bills. So for Internet Slowdown Day, participating sites displayed the loading symbol, so that spinning wheel of death. They put that on their homepage, and they asked users to send comments to the FCC, to Congress, to the White House. And throughout the summer and into the fall of 2014, that coalition grew. So Netflix, Vimeo, Imgur, Tumblr, Dig, Reddit, they all took the lead. Colleges and libraries got involved in the fight, which is sort of funny because many colleges and libraries explicitly block torrents and specific websites on their networks. So they were fighting for an open internet for thee, but not for me. But all this attention generated even more public comments directed to the FCC. And by the time the public comment period ended, they had received nearly 3.7 million comments from the public, more than they ever had on any other issue.
And I'm guessing these were mostly pro-net neutrality.
Yeah. So the Sunlight Foundation conducted an analysis of the first batch of 800,000 comments. Those were released by the FCC, and they found that 99% of those comments were in favor of net neutrality. They also found that at least 60% of those 800,000 comments were from form letters written by organized campaigns. So that report was released in September 2014, and then 3 months later, the Sunlight Foundation released another report, and this one looked at the next batch of comments. This was around 1.6 million, and they found something very surprising. So first batch, 99% in favor of net neutrality, and the second batch, 40% were in favor of net neutrality.
What changed in the interim?
Conservatives got involved. So there was a group called...
Well, that's not legitimate. They're not allowed to organize.
Yeah.
If conservative groups organize to get people to send in form letters, that's not legitimate. That's a conspiracy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there was a group called American Commitment. And they
that does sound either made up or like the name of a romantic dramedy. So
they started their own campaign against net neutrality. Here's how the Sunlight Foundation put it, quote, a letter-writing campaign that appears to have been organized by a shadowy organization with ties to the Koch brothers inundated the Federal Communications Commission with missives opposed to net neutrality, an analysis of the Sunlight Foundation reveals. This is so funny to me because the Sunlight Foundation, they did not apparently have any issues with letter-writing campaigns, organized letter-writing campaigns, when they were coming from the pro-net neutrality side. But now it was an issue.
Well, now it's I guess they would say that,
it's shadowy.
If people get, this tendency, I think, has gotten worse to pretend. I'm trying to steelman it. If John Oliver, in the guise of a consumer activist, gets people riled up about that is a little bit different from AstroTurf stuff from.
Right.
But there were liberal advocacy groups involved in this too, so it's not clear exactly what the difference is.
Yeah, a huge percentage of these letters were form letters organized by net neutrality campaigns. That was true in the first batch. That was true in the second batch. And this, ties to the Koch Foundation, to the Koch brothers.
Yeah.
I don't know that you see this as much anymore, maybe because one of the Koch brothers is dead. But in this period, this was very common in progressive media. I am sure I am just as guilty as using Koch brothers as a slur as any other outlet when I worked at places like Grist. The Koch brothers were a symbol of evil. It was like the Soros Foundation is a symbol of evil on the right. If you are Koch brothers affiliated, you must be bad. And I always find that amusing now because, yes, the Koch brothers, or brother now, they fund a lot of conservative and libertarian groups. They are unabashedly capitalist, but they also fund the Lincoln Center, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. David Koch gave millions of dollars to PBS, but you don't really hear PBS referred to as Koch funded. It's only invoked if you want to discredit the cause itself.
Yeah, and I think most notably, I think they do a lot of sort of anti-drug war stuff that a lot of leftists would be in favor of.
Anyway, so American Commitment was one of a handful of groups that didn't want ISPs reclassified. Now, obviously, the ISPs themselves were opposed to reclassification. The National Cable and Telecommunications Association, they were donors to American Commitment, and their members included companies like Comcast, Charter, Cox, other internet providers. Cox, by the way, this is the family of Fergie Chambers. That's where he gets his allowance.
Nice.
So this is to be expected, right? Corporate interests. But the coalition was actually broader than you might imagine. So on the last episode, I mentioned Danny Kimball. He wrote a book called Net Neutrality and the Battle for the Open Internet. And he wrote that other groups that opposed the net neutrality effort included the NAACP, the National Urban League, League of United Latin American Citizens, the Rainbow Push Coalition, and most of the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. They all lobbied against broadband being reclassified.
That's interesting. Why were these groups opposed to such regulation?
I want you to guess, Jesse.
Jesse Jackson wanted to start
his own cable company. Okay, so it was money. Kimball writes that some of these groups received, quote, millions of dollars from broadband providers during the net neutrality fight in the form of donations, contributions, sponsorships, and funding for community initiatives. The civil rights groups were really split on this. So the more grassroots group tended to be pro-net neutrality. They viewed internet service providers as gatekeepers. Without net neutrality, they might block or throttle content from activist organizations, independent media, etc. The older, more established groups tended to be against it because they argued that regulation could discourage broadband investment in underserved communities. Now, was this a genuine concern or a pretext? I don't know, but telecom companies were giving these groups a lot of money.
Did the flood of comments that FCC got, did that affect their decision-making at all?
So not officially. Federal agencies aren't required to take public comment into account. And remember, comments were split thanks to this conservative letter writing campaign. But in November 2014, someone else did weigh in, then President Barack Obama. And this was very unexpected.
Why was it unexpected? I mean, I would imagine he was pro-net neutrality, so why is it unexpected for him to weigh in?
So it's not illegal for presidents to weigh in on FCC proposals, but it's very rare. So the commissioners are appointed by the president, but the FCC is an independent agency, and unlike other agencies, commissioners do not serve at the pleasure of the president.
Okay, I can explain the rest of this.
Okay.
So you know how back in the day, Obama wearing a tan suit was a scandal?
Yeah.
Because it was unbecoming of the office. So you're pointing back to a much quainter time when people took things like the independence of the FCC seriously.
Yes.
Versus the era of Brandon Carr, where the FCC is a branch of Mar-a-Lago, basically.
Yes, basically.
Okay, so this was so at the time, I'm sure a lot of conservatives were outraged that conservatives who now support Trump were outraged that Obama overstepped boundaries by weighing in on this.
I mean, not even just conservatives. Democrats were also very surprised by this because it was so rare.
A lot of people catching the vapors on the fainting couches, yeah.
And so the Wall Street Journal did some reporting on this later and explained what happened. And basically the story is that Obama aides were meeting with companies like Etsy, Kickstarter, Tumblr, so companies that at one time were startups, and they were able to convince the president himself to get behind the net neutrality effort. So around that time, Obama released this video.
Hi, everybody. Ever since the internet was created, it's been organized around basic principles of openness, fairness, and freedom. There are no gatekeepers deciding which sites you get to access. There are no toll roads on the information superhighway. This set of principles, the idea of net neutrality, has unleashed the power of the internet and given innovators the chance to thrive. Abandoning these principles would threaten to end the internet as we know it. That's why I'm laying out a plan to keep the internet free and open. And that's why I'm urging the Federal Communications Commission to do everything they can to protect net neutrality for everyone.
That same day, Tim Wu, who you'll remember from episode 1, was one of the early ideological fathers of net neutrality. He published a piece in the New Yorker about this FCC fight. And also on that same day, activists showed up at the home of FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler, blocked his driveway, and demanded that he reclassify broadband or else they would not let him leave. It's like he's like probably trying to go pick up his daughter for fucking soccer practice. And they were like, not until you reclassify ISPs. Wheeler, by the way, later blamed the White House for this.
So things are getting pretty intense.
Yes, but by now you have the media pretty much in lockstep. The White House is explicitly endorsing reclassification. There's this mounting public pressure campaign, both online and in real life. So at an FCC meeting that December, protesters rushed the dais and unfurled a banner that said, reclassify now, like a very dorky flash mob. And altogether, this worked. So in late February 2015, Chairman Tom Wheeler opened the monthly FCC meeting by saying, today is a red letter day. And by that afternoon, the commission had reclassified broadband as a common carrier and adopted new net neutrality rules. And this was officially titled the Open Internet Report and Order. So net neutrality was finally, and for the first time, the law of the land as of 2015. But as you'll hear, it would not last.
What were like the specific rules they enacted at the time?
Okay, so if you'll remember from last week, in 2010, the FCC passed the Open Internet Order of 2010, and there were 3 main components to that rule. Do you want to guess? Can you remember? Dig back, dig deep.
No fatties.
Yep.
You smoke them if you gotta. I don't know.
Okay. It was transparency.
Yes, obviously.
No blocking.
Obviously.
So ISPs couldn't block lawful websites even if they really, really didn't like them. And 3, no unreasonable discrimination. So you couldn't favor some traffic over other traffic. But as you'll also remember, and you remember this, I'm sure, Jesse, that was later overturned by the courts because the FCC didn't have the authority to regulate ISPs in that capacity, so this was not enforceable.
The court said that they did not. Right. There was a fight over whether they had that authority. The FCC said yes, right? And the courts were like, nope.
Yes.
Sorry, bro.
And that's why they had to reclassify them as common carriers so that they could have the authority to enforce these rules.
Okay, so it could have gone down that the FCC has this enforcement power, whatever ISPs are. As it turned out, the court said you can only regulate them if they're common carriers.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's what they did in 2015. And the 2015 rules, they maintain those 3 core tenets: transparency, no blocking, no unreasonable discrimination. But they also introduced new regulations, most notably a preemptive ban on paid prioritization arrangements. So that's the fast lane thing. There could be no fast lanes. There could be no slow lanes. They also extended the rules to wireless internet providers, which hadn't been regulated by net neutrality up to that point.
Gotcha.
But the most controversial rule was that the FCC gave itself sweeping authority to step in later if any future broadband or business practice seemed to hurt users or websites. And this was so broad that it was actually opposed by pro-net neutrality groups, including the Electronic Frontier Foundation. So basically, the net neutrality advocates got all they wanted and then some. For telecommunications companies, this was the nightmare. So remember when I told you last week that the thing they most feared was price controls set by the government?
Yeah.
Well, in the 2015 order, the FCC didn't set rates, but they retained the authority to do so in the future. So this was a huge victory for internet activism. And then in April 2015, activists scored another win when Comcast dropped their bid for Time Warner Cable. We discussed that last week. Again, this is a huge victory. You know, lobbyists had spent millions of dollars trying to push through this merger. They failed. And this showed activists that these public pressure campaigns could really work. So Li Fong, he wrote a piece in The Intercept called Net Neutrality is Here, thanks to an unprecedented guerrilla activism campaign. That was the vibe. David has slayed Comcast. We were, I guess, still in the tech optimism era at the time.
God, very hard. It wasn't that long ago. Very hard to try to bring yourself back to that era.
And yet so many millions of years. Victory, however, was short-lived because, Jesse, something big happened in November 2016. Any guesses?
My birthday?
I thought your birthday was in September.
Nope.
I'm pretty sure it is.
Oh, okay. I guess I was wrong about when my birthday is.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else that big that happened in November 2016? Nothing comes to mind. Why don't you tell me?
Donald Trump happened.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So when Trump took office for the first time,
the first of many,
control of the FCC transferred back to Republicans. So as was expected, then Commissioner Ajit Pai was named as chairman. Now, Ajit Pai is a lawyer with a background in telecommunications law. He's also a Republican and had been appointed to the FCC by Barack Obama in 2012. I mentioned this in the last episode, but again, the FCC has 5 commissioners. By law, no more than 3 can be from the same party. So in general, the Democratic president will appoint 3 Dems and 2 Republicans, and the Republican president will appoint 3 Republicans and 2 Dems. And technically, they could also appoint Libertarians or Greens or members of the DSA, but they don't. Maybe during the AOC presidency. So Ajit Pai was a sitting member of the FCC, but he was confirmed as chair in October 2017. And anyone who was following policy at the time knew that the next Republican chair was likely to repeal the 2015 rules. And Ajit Pai was really seen as a villain even before any sort of rule changes were announced. So take this sentence. This was published in a certain Seattle Alt Weekly. Net neutrality, a long-held principle of the internet that was established as an official rule during the Obama administration, requires internet service providers to treat all content equally, so they aren't allowed to slow down, say, this website just because we might write that FCC Chairman Ajit Pai looks like he gargles Mitch McConnell's balls.
That's harsh.
I wrote that. Apologies to Mr. Pai.
I knew it.
He does, I want to correct the record here. He does not look like he gargles Mitch McConnell's balls.
One of the first images of him, he has a giant mug.
Yes, the Reese's mug.
He's sipping from Reese's mug.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know. John Oliver talked about the Reese's mug a lot on, on another episode. He really loves the giant Reese's mug.
Interesting. Okay.
So Ajit Pai took a ton of heat from activists, from the media, from the public, from me, particularly because this was in the midst of the hashtag resistance and, widespread fears that Trump would usher in fascism. I would say that time, those fears were overstated. This time, I'm a little more on board. But here's an example of the rhetoric at the time. So this was from the internet advocacy group Free Press. They published this in March 2017, before any changes had actually been announced. So Jesse, please read this.
From the women's marches that took place across the country and around the world to the mass protests against the Muslim ban and immigration raids, people are resisting the neo-fascist agenda President Trump is unleashing on our nation. The primary reason why millions have been able to mobilize so quickly is because they have the ability to use the open internet to communicate to the masses and organize a resistance. That's why protecting the net neutrality rules that keep the internet open is more critical than ever. As authoritarianism rises, digital free speech can ensure our opposition to authoritarianism also rises. But unfettered access to an open internet and our ability to flex our digital muscles to advocate for the health and well-being of our communities could soon come to an end. In January, Trump appointed Ajit Pai as the new chairman of the Federal Communications Commission. In so doing, he found someone who shares his disdain for popular democracy, privacy rights, the truth, and the poor. Huh.
Yes, it's a lot, So people didn't like Ajit Pai, and they immediately started protesting. So at the April 2017 FCC meeting, protesters with Free Press, they showed up, they disrupted the meeting, they rickrolled Ajit Pai. So one protester wrote this later. We interrupted a speech by FCC Chairman Ajit Pai, blasting the 1987 Rick Astley song Never Gonna Give You Up over a speaker, while we sang modified lyrics that drew attention to the present threat against net neutrality protections.
Could they get sued for copyright? Did they get... when did Rick Astley die? Did they get his estate's permission? I have so many questions.
I think if you don't monetize it, I think it's okay.
Okay. I was just concerned about it. I've been thinking a lot about copyright stuff lately.
Yeah. To continue, we sang silly lyrics like, never gonna give you up, net neutrality, never gonna never gonna run around and hurt you.
Never gonna give you up.
Never gonna give you up.
Net neutrality. Never gonna. That is really fucking bad.
It's bad. Yeah, they were escorted out of the building.
Were they escorted out because they were disruptive or because their song was so dumb?
Well, it was Homeland Security, so probably because of the song.
Yeah.
5 of the protesters were also banned from the building. So that same month, April 2017, Chairman Ajit Pai announced that, yes, he was going to repeal the 2015 rules. ISPs would no longer be classified as common carriers, and net neutrality would no longer be enforceable. Quoting Pai here, going forward, we cannot stick with regulations from the Great Depression that were meant to micromanage Ma Bell. Nothing about the internet was broken in 2015. Jesse, you were alive in 2015, knowing all that you know now about the fight over net neutrality. What do you think about that statement?
That nothing about the internet was broken in 2015?
Yeah.
I mean, the internet was starting to suck in 2015.
Well, he's not talking about content. He's talking about the actual, like the pipes, the tubes.
I mean, I guess a lot of this comes down to the question of like, do you want to formalize rules to ensure this thing we already have? But no, in 2015, other than like the BitTorrent throttling, and then which was
like early 2000s.
When was the BitTorrent throttling?
Like 2005. I think he's pretty much right. But back in 2017, I was for sure convinced, like everyone else, that without net neutrality, the free and open internet was dead. You know, I believe John Oliver. I'm sure I wrote slop articles about how John Oliver was saving net neutrality. And in May 2017, the day before the FCC was scheduled to meet for their monthly meeting, John Oliver ran a second segment on net neutrality, and this one focused in large part on Ajit Pai, including his mug. So let's watch a clip.
But for all of Pai's doofy, hey, I'm just like you guys persona, there are some things about him that you should really know. He's a former lawyer for Verizon, and despite being a smart man, he sure loves to play dumb over why ISPs were ever moved to Title II.
For decades before 2015, we had a free and open internet. Indeed, the free and open internet developed and flourished under light touch regulation. We weren't living in some digital dystopia before the partisan imposition of a massive plan hatched in Washington saved all of us.
Now, that is true. 2015 was not a digital dystopia for anyone, with the possible exception of Pizza Rat. Because think about it, the internet put that rat through hell. One cheat day in 3 months of eating paleo, and she never hears the fucking end of it. Oh, that's right, I said she, hashtag greasy filth monster, hashtag feminism. But Pai's larger argument there is deeply disingenuous because he has to know that Verizon, his ex-employer, won a lawsuit that meant if the FCC wanted strong, enforceable protection, its only real option was to reclassify the ISPs. And yet he cheerily insists, under questioning, that there is just no evidence that cable companies were engaging in rampant wrongdoing.
So Ajit Pai says in that clip that there was no rampant wrongdoing on the part of ISPs, and there wasn't even before the 2015 Open Internet Order codified net neutrality. But Oliver is like, no, there was wrongdoing. And as an example, he pointed to a 2011 case where Google Wallet, so that's a mobile payment system, it was blocked by AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon. And as Oliver explained it, the wireless companies were blocking Google Wallet because it competed with a payment system named, unfortunately, ISIS, that the three companies had launched as a joint venture. But once again, he simplified this complex technical issue to the point of inaccuracy. So what actually happened is that at the time, Google Wallet needed to access a secure part of your phone, basically like a chip or a SIM card in every individual phone. The carriers controlled this. They didn't want to give Google access to this, both for security and for business reasons. But it wasn't about network traffic, which is what net neutrality rules govern. So this would not have violated net neutrality rules. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like almost on the verge of a non sequitur that would get people to think it was about net neutrality when it just wasn't.
Yeah. Let me give you a more modern parallel. So Apple refuses to allow third-party mobile payment apps to access my phone's NFC chip. And the NFC chip is the piece of hardware that's used for contactless payments, like Apple Pay. So the thing you tap, the NFC chip enables that. And Apple prevents other apps from using it. So if I want to tap, I'm using Apple Pay. This is anti-competitive, to be sure.
Yeah.
And in Europe, regulators have forced Apple to open the NFC chip to third-party apps, but it has nothing to do with net neutrality. So that's basically what happened in the 2011 case that Oliver mentioned. Nothing to do with net neutrality. Plus, Google figured out a workaround. Google Wallet is very much alive today, unlike ISIS, which was actually acquired after a much-needed name change by, you guessed it, Google.
They changed the name to Al-Qaeda.
Hamas. So once again, Oliver bastardized a real-life case to make his point. The Google Wallet case had nothing to do with net neutrality. And once again, at the end of his segment, Oliver urged viewers to go to, the website was gofccyourself.com. It redirected to the official page for the FCC to file a comment. And of course, his viewers did. So this was 2017. And in 2017, social justice was all the rage, and net neutrality advocacy groups leaned into this. So, Jesse, I want you to look at this webpage from Public Knowledge. This is a group that campaigned for net neutrality. Read the headline there.
Net neutrality, the social justice issue of our time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The social justice issue of our time.
This seems to be making a lot of arguments that like activist voices could be suppressed in the absence of net neutrality. They mentioned like Black Lives Matter and Ferguson and stuff like that.
Exactly. So this rhetorical shift, this was a fundamental change in how advocates had marketed net neutrality. It was now a social justice issue, right? A civil rights issue. Net neutrality was anti-racist. And so Ajit Pai and the Trump FCC rolling back these 2015 rules was a step back not just for a free and open internet, but a step back for civil rights. And that became the focus.
Yeah. So there's like a chameleon-like nature to the debate where like whatever's going on in the world at the moment, it becomes about that.
Jesse, this is probably a good place for housekeeping. Will you do it?
Yes, we are a podcast. You can find us at blockedandreported.org. There you can also find the best way to support us, which is to become a premium subscriber for a very affordable monthly fee.
$7.
You can get all sorts of extra stuff. Extra episodes, access to hangouts. You can weekly open comments threads that run to the thousands of comments. Personals
book club
are coming up. Personals is a once a year thing we do in February for Valentine's Day that led to at least one marriage.
No murders.
And no deaths that we are aware of. Also, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. And if you have tips or other feedback, blockedandreportedpodcast@gmail.com. But Katie, let's get back to the story.
So the refocus of net neutrality as a social justice issue came with some strategic disagreements among activists. This was documented by Brian Fung of the Washington Post, but two distinct factions emerged within the broader net neutrality coalition. So the first faction was dominated by public interest groups and consumer advocacy groups, so like Free Press and Public Knowledge. Fung calls them the hardball faction. They wanted a congressional resolution that would overrule the FCC. They wanted to primary incumbents who didn't support net neutrality. They wanted to punish anyone who didn't support the cause, including Democrats. And then you had the second faction, which was largely made up of tech companies and trade associations, and they were willing to compromise. So ideological purity was less important to them than getting shit done.
So who won between these two factions?
The hardballers. And on July 12th, 2017, they staged the internet-wide day of action to save net neutrality. So remember, this started with the battle over SOPA and PIPA in 2012, the Internet Blackout Day. We talked about it last week. This time, advocacy groups mobilized over 125,000 websites and online platforms. This included smaller websites and tech behemoths like Spotify, 4chan, Airbnb, Mozilla, OkCupid, Vimeo, Tinder, Expedia, Pornhub, Yelp, SoundCloud. All these companies displayed banners or pop-ups encouraging users to contact the FCC and Congress and oppose the repeal of net neutrality. So Congress received almost 3.5 million emails in a single day. And during the FCC's full public comment period, they received approximately 22 million comments.
And these were overwhelmingly pro-net neutrality?
Well, no. And it turned out that the vast majority of them were fake. So, the New York Attorney General's office, then and now headed by Letitia James, they conducted who
perpetrated one of the worst mortgage frauds in history. Just a criminal. Sorry, I just had to break it and say that because I'm so mad about the mortgage fraud.
So they conducted an investigation and found that nearly 18 million submissions were fraudulent and that this was happening on both sides. So there was an anti-net neutrality group called Broadband for America. This was an industry group. They spent over $4 million on the campaign. So they paid consulting firms, which then spent their money generating more than 8.5 million fake comments. And then on the pro-net neutrality side, one 19-year-old computer science student generated 7.7 million fraudulent comments, and then another 1.6 million were generated from some other unknown source.
We don't need AI.
We don't.
We already knew how to create terabytes of fake bullshit without AI. It's unnecessary.
Exactly. So the official FCC vote on repealing the reclassification of ISPs as common carriers and ending net neutrality, that was scheduled for December 2017. And advocates really ramped up their efforts throughout the year. And the protests got more personal. So Ajay Pai later told the Washington Examiner, quote, "People were threatening to murder my children.
Jesus.
My son, who was in kindergarten at the time, couldn't take the school bus to school for an entire year." He continued, I had to spend thousands of dollars out of my own pocket for a home security system. My personal email account was hacked. My in-laws would get calls at 3 a.m. cursing them out for no reason at all.
There was a time when I would have been like, maybe he's exaggerating, but then I saw Blue Sky, which is where all these people sort of congregate and feed off one another. And if anything, it sounds like he got easier treatment than he could have.
So people would go to his home in Virginia and leave unmarked packages on his porch. They would take photographs inside his house through the window. Demonstrators put up signs and banners outside his home. There was one handmade sign that named his kids, quote, "Is this really the world you want Annabelle and Alexander to inherit?" Did I just dox them?
Oh my God.
Another said, "They will come to know the truth. Dad murdered democracy in cold blood." Activists sent pizzas to his house every half hour, or at least that was the rumor. It actually wasn't quite as dramatic as that. So I confirmed this with Ajit Pai, and he said 7 or 8 of them were delivered to the house over the course of a few days, but it pretty much ended there because I asked all the neighborhood pizza places to ignore any further orders for delivery to my address.
Can you imagine if then he really wants a pizza?
He can't
like
get
he's
it.
super hungry,
Yeah.
and they're like, "You said nope. You said not to." It's like, I know, but it's different. That would be so sad.
He also said, after
man.
that, I still got plenty of unmarked mail and some people visiting or trying to visit, as the security team I eventually got usually blocked them, the house, but no further pizzas, alas. And of course, there was a ton of bullshit online, like Cloudflare CEO Matthew Prince. He said he was looking into a way to slow down just Ajit Pai's internet connection to dial-up speeds.
I mean, that's kind of
That's kind of funny.
Are we going to get into the huge about face on all this stuff in terms of like Kiwi Farms?
We can. Let's get into it now.
I mean, I just, in thinking about the sorts of people who are really in favor of net neutrality and who are making all these arguments about how unpopular content shouldn't be censored.
Yep.
I'm guessing the Venn diagram is almost a circle of people who then said, because Kiwi Farms had very ugly but not illegal stuff, they thought it was a no-brainer that hackers should be allowed to take Kiwi Farms offline. And of course, Matthew Prince, as Cloudflare CEO, withdrew their protection of it, letting that happen. So
Yes.
none of these people actually believe in anything, is what I'm saying.
Right. Like if I think of any website I can think of that I have been unable to access, not because of some temporary tech glitch or something like this, but something that was specifically blocked from I am blocked from accessing this website. It has never come from ISPs. It has come from the Kiwi Farms is the only example I can think of.
And not being blocked, but it being taken offline by like DDoS attacks and stuff.
Right.
But specifically because activists pressured Cloudflare not to say,
not to protect it.
Yeah.
Yes. It has never come from Verizon. It came from like trans activists, basically.
The call was coming from inside the house all along. The threat to a free and open internet.
Right. So in Ajit Pai, he was just also getting just a fuck ton of tweets. Like, Jesse, I posted one in our show notes here. Read this.
I mean, this is some random troll, but at Ajit Pai FCC, "Hey cutie, you look like you could take a steaming hot load to those pearly whites of yours. I'm curious how you managed to work your way up from Indian tech support to the #1 brain dead tortellini dick bitch in America."
It's a little bit racist.
A little bit racist. Sort of like, and it's sort of it is lefty, dirtbag leftist coded, brain dead tortellini dick bitch. Although who knows in this day and age.
Yeah, so the hashtag, you can still search the hashtag Ajit Pai sucks and see some colorful insults directed his way. So there were also protests elsewhere, including at the Capitol and outside Verizon stores, because Pai had been a lawyer for Verizon. I guess they figured the minimum wage workers at Verizon would call him up and be like, "Brah, please." Celebrities got involved. Michael Stipe, Tom Morello, Will Wheaton, Amanda Palmer.
Oh, Will Wheaton.
Yeah, he's come up on the show before.
Oh,
Why?
man.
Why is he coming
What
up?
an interesting character. Well, he had like a side minor role on Star Trek: The Next Generation, and then I don't know if it's fair to say he reignited his career by becoming a social justice advocate, but like during Gamergate, he really became the just platonic ideal of the performative white male who's not like the others.
So this was a huge thing on social media. So Jesse, read this tweet from @TheRealBanksy. It's not actually the real Banksy, it's the fake Banksy, which in a way I think makes it more Banksy than Banksy. Anyway, this tweet, again, not from the real Banksy, but from someone people thought was the real Banksy, got hundreds of thousands of retweets.
Twitter, $14.99 a month. Snapchat, $9.99 a month. YouTube, $19.99 a month. Netflix, $9.99 per movie. Google, $1.99 per search. if you don't want to pay extra for your favorite sites, you need to be supporting hashtag net neutrality. One thing, so he's basically portraying this world in which you need to pay $2 per Google search, and I think there's maybe a blind spot in the liberal or leftist mind here, because this would never happen.
No,
because people wouldn't pay those amounts,
right.
and competitors. It's just I'm actually not even. There's part of me that's like, okay, why not have a rule dictating all traffic's treated equally? But these responses are so sort of divorced from reality and over the top, just because like they're in certain ways markets like work pretty well to get people stuff they like. People respond
to incentives. Companies also respond to incentives. But this really, like Al Franken called net neutrality the free speech issue of our time. That was the sort of rhetoric. It was seen as this kind of life or death situation. You know, of course, Senators Warren and Bernie Sanders were fighting for it. Nancy Pelosi said repealing net neutrality was an attack on democracy itself. On social media, the hashtag Stop the FCC and hashtag Save Net Neutrality were amplifying the message. Activists were urging followers to contact Congress. And then right before the FCC was scheduled to vote in December 2017, net neutrality activists organized an online protest called Break the Internet. So starting December 12th that year, websites and internet users across the US deliberately made their content appear broken. The campaign ran through the eve of the FCC decision, effectively serving as this internet-wide red alert. And then the day of the vote itself, activists stood outside the FCC headquarters, ringing bells in protest. And yet, despite all of this, beside Banksy's tweet and Cher's tweet and Will Wheaton's tweet, none of it worked. There was even a bomb called in during the meeting and they had to evacuate. But in the end, the Trump FCC voted on what they called the Restoring Internet Freedom Order and repealed the Obama-era rules. So once again, net neutrality was dead.
Okay. And did anything happen?
No, not really.
Okay. I mean, it's like I guess we don't know, but...
So after the Trump FCC killed net neutrality, the opposition immediately rallied. Many groups, along with some states, announced plans to sue the FCC. In Congress, Dems began organizing a resolution to overturn the FCC's order. None of this ultimately panned out, but what did happen was that a 33-year-old California man sent emails to Ajit Pai threatening his children. The man's name was very confusingly Makara Man. He was arrested.
Markara Man?
Markara Man. Yeah.
Sounds like there's a town named Markara, and a man from there did something. Mm-hmm. What a strange name.
That was his name. So he was arrested, and he told the FBI that he had a message for Ajit Pai. Quote, "I'm sorry I made a threat against your kids. That was crossing the line. I hope you'll change your mind, but I doubt it. Best regards, Mark."
Markara Man, if he was on like a last name, first name list, it'd be Man, Markara. Yeah. And I find that pretty funny.
So at that time, Pai was really seen as public enemy number one. But the truth is, the net neutrality wars just sort of fizzled out after that. Like there were still legal challenges, and a few states, including Washington State, my own state, enacted their own net neutrality rules that have, by the way, never been legally enforced. But the public just sort of stopped caring. There was other shit going on. You know, the same companies that had supported net neutrality were being blamed for Trump's election. There was Cambridge Analytica. There was fake news on Facebook. Twitter giving Trump a megaphone directly to the public. All of these companies were seen as complicit in his election and his presidency. And in response to that criticism, these companies in turn started censoring conservative content. And that is sort of ironic, right? Like the companies that were fighting for net neutrality, for no discrimination in web access, were absolutely engaging in discrimination themselves. Sorry, go ahead.
Is that a fair comparison between individual platforms, albeit in an often heavy-handed way? If an individual platform says, we're not going to allow this sort of content on here, that strikes me as different from internet service providers being able to pick winners and losers, like who gets bandwidth lies.
I think that if you advocate for a free and open internet and then you censor conservative voices because you don't like them, I think you're a hypocrite.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, I think they were doing this. They were advocating for net neutrality because of public pressure campaigns. They were censoring conservatives because of public pressure campaigns. They were just responding to what people, like who the loudest yeller was.
Yeah.
Do you need some examples of the censorship I'm talking about?
Sure.
Okay, so
And then we can fight over whether it's actually censorship.
So Facebook labeled videos by Diamond and Silk. Those are those Trump bloggers. They labeled them as unsafe.
Unsafe.
They then testified in Congress that the platform was suppressing their content. In July 2018, a Vice News report, so this is unimpeachable, they found that Twitter's search function was not auto-suggesting Republican officials' accounts. This fueled claims of shadow banning. In August 2018, Apple, Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify banned Alex Jones for repeated violations. Around the same time, Twitter banned the Proud Boys and Gavin McInnes, and then, of course, later banned Donald Trump after January 6th. And even if you think that these actions are totally fine and these are independent companies engaging in their own content moderation practices, I think people can make that argument. But the perception that social media was censoring conservative voices, for one, it kicked off the partisan debate over social media fairness. And two, more importantly, it led to Elon Musk's eventual purchase of Twitter.
Yeah.
I think all of that is downstream.
I agree.
And at the same time, all the predictions about this two-tiered internet with fast lanes and slow lanes and mass censorship, it just didn't materialize. So between the time that net neutrality protections were repealed in 2024, the only major incident often cited as a net neutrality violation was during the 2018 Mendocino wildfire. So the Santa Clara Fire Department's command vehicle hit its data cap, and the carrier initially required them to upgrade their plan. Net neutrality,
that's not a net neutrality thing.
Right. So net neutrality activists point to this as a violation, but data caps are not a net neutrality issue because net neutrality is about equal access to content, not the amount of data a customer can use. So this is this thing that often happens where net neutrality activists will point, or John Oliver will point to these examples of net neutrality violations, but they're not actually net neutrality violations.
Yeah, they seem to do that a lot.
Yeah. So the repeal of net neutrality did not, you might have noticed, usher in the end of the free and open internet. You know, we're all here. We can see it now. The internet has its flaws, but it's pretty open. And the censorship that I've seen in recent years was not from Comcast or Verizon. It was from Twitter and Facebook and Reddit and YouTube. It was from Cloudflare, which didn't directly censor Kiwi Farms, but they did refuse to.
They took an action that anyone could have guessed what would happen.
Right.
Nice. Yeah.
But then in 2020, there was another election. So after Biden took office in 2021, he named FCC Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel. He named her chairman. And she, just like Ajit Pai, promised to overturn her predecessor's legacy and now reinstate net neutrality, which the Biden FCC did in April 2024. But this time around, A, few people cared, and B, the legal landscape had changed dramatically. So in July of 2024, the Supreme Court overturned the Chevron rule. This was the rule that let courts defer to federal agencies when laws were unclear. And this significantly handicapped federal agencies. And it meant that the Biden FCC's net neutrality order was almost guaranteed to lose in court, which it did in January 2025. So once again, net neutrality was dead. And the reaction could not have been more different than it was when Ajit Pai killed it in 2017. I mean, back then there were lawsuits, massive campaigns, viral outrage, media coverage, a John Oliver segment, wasted pizzas, people threatened his kids. But this time, I didn't even know that this happened until I started working on this segment. Did you?
No, I did not.
Yeah, no one cared. And the truth is, in the long history of the internet, or the short history of the internet, network neutrality has only been official policy for about 2 years and change. So Jesse, I'm curious, do you think anything was different about the internet in those few years when net neutrality was on the books?
No, I also don't think, I think whether or not we would notice it doesn't necessarily answer the question. I think it probably turns out, obviously the worst Banksy-esque fears of you have to pay to do anything on the internet didn't come true and never were going to come true just because of how competition and markets work. I guess part of me is still not convinced. I guess I don't understand the downside of having some of these regulations. I think it's one thing if people really misunderstood the technical arguments and if John Oliver was sloppy. It seems overall this didn't seem like an issue. I still don't like the idea of ISPs being able to pick winners and losers if they could technically do that.
Right, but the thing is they don't. So that's what the anti-net neutrality advocates argue. This isn't something that happens. ISPs don't do this. Customers wouldn't like it. They don't do it. So the regulations themselves are unnecessary. It's not as though I don't think there are real threats to a free and open internet. I do. Like, Congress is currently closer to eliminating Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act than ever before. This would mean that websites are liable for what users post on them. And the implications for this are massive, because if a company can be sued for what people say on their app or in the comment section or on social media, platforms will start censoring much more. And there would be some upsides to this, to be sure. You know, if Facebook can get sued for scams posted on their platform, I mean, a huge percentage of Facebook content is scams. If they could be sued for that, they would crack down on scammers.
Yeah.
But the implications for free speech are enormous. Or maybe not. I mean, maybe it'll be just like net neutrality and we won't actually notice when it's gone. I kind of doubt it, though.
This seems like much more specific and less hypothetical. If Facebook was really held responsible for anything posted to it, it's hard to see how that wouldn't be a disaster.
I mean, if we were held responsible for what people said in our comments, we would moderate
Those
the comments.
monsters.
Yes. Yeah, so my position, where I land on this now, which is not where I was in 2017, 2018, is that this was kind of much ado about nothing. But I wanted to check with people who were more directly involved in the fight. So I emailed Public Knowledge, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, Pre-Press, Fight for Our Future, Demand Progress, half a dozen net neutrality activists. I emailed Tim Wu. I asked them all the same question. Now that net neutrality is dead, what has changed for consumers? Guess what they said?
I don't know. You tell me.
Nothing. No one wrote me back. I didn't get a single fucking response. I did have better luck with a scholar named David Chofness. He's at Northwestern. So he published a paper in 2019 that claimed that wireless networks are throttling content all the time. And to test this, he and his researchers built an app called Weehi. So people can download the app and it basically runs speed tests for different apps on your phone. So you can select like Instagram, Netflix, HBO Max, etc. And it'll tell you if your network provider is throttling your speed. You can download the app yourself to test this. So I talked to Chofness on the phone, and what he told me is that what they found is that throttling basically does not happen on wired broadband networks. So your home Wi-Fi, fiber, whatever, they don't throttle content. But they found that cellular networks do this all the time, specifically when it comes to streaming video. So he named Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Xfinity, prepaid carriers like Cricket and Boost. And when I asked him why would they do this, he said he doesn't know, because a lot of these companies advertise, lightning fast 5G. So why would they be slowing down streaming video if it degrades the quality of the service for the customer? He didn't have an answer to that. But according to Chofness, these cell companies are constantly violating the principles of net neutrality, not by blocking, which would be obvious, but by slowing down video streaming.
So it sounds like it does have an impact on some consumers' experience, right?
Well, here's the thing. So there can be multiple reasons why you're having trouble streaming video on your phone. So this happens all the time, right? It could be your Wi-Fi signal, or it could be that your provider is intentionally lowering your download speeds and you might not know which it is. And even if your provider is throttling, you might not notice. So I downloaded Weehi. I tested my home Wi-Fi. It's through Spectrum, no throttling detected. And then I turned off Wi-Fi and I got on 5G. My cell provider is Mint, and I ran the app again. And Weehi did detect throttling on my HBO Max app. Significant throttling, too. It was like half the download speed it should have been. So then I opened up HBO Max on my phone, and I pulled up the first video, and it was completely fine. So no delay, no lags at all. So were they throttling? According to Weehi, yes. But it didn't degrade my experience as a user.
Okay. So, but I mean, this basically suggests that the basic argument that these big companies could pick winners and losers and choose to throttle, that they do that. It's just, you're just saying it hasn't affected your experience, and you think it might not affect other users' experiences.
Well, I have no idea. I mean, people download the app, try it for yourself.
Yeah.
So I ran this paper by Will Reinhart from the American Enterprise Institute. Will has been following this issue for years. He's a free market guy, low regulation guy. He's a critic of net neutrality regulations. Not the principles of net neutrality, but the regulations themselves. So he read Chofness's paper, and he pointed out that if Chofness is correct, the companies were throttling video apps when the 2015 net neutrality order was in place. So the researchers, their data set was from January 2018 to January 2019. The net neutrality repeal wasn't in effect until June 2018. So for the first half of the study, there were net neutrality laws on the books, and it doesn't appear to have changed the carrier's behavior whatsoever. So I suspect Chofness would say, okay, well, then the problem is enforcement. But Reinhardt told me in an email, quote, if these policies, i.e. the throttling, predated the repeal of federal net neutrality rules, then the predictions about what ISPs would do absent regulation were demonstrably wrong. The behavior was already happening under the rules.
Gotcha. Okay.
So Will also told me that bigger picture, when it comes to this years-long fight over net neutrality, he said, quote, the real tragedy wasn't just the wasted resources, but the opportunity cost. While activists were celebrating their victory at the FCC, they ignored the more difficult but durable path of legislative action. Congress moves slowly, but when it acts, the results tend to stick. So he's saying that if activists had focused more on enshrining net neutrality in law, rather than flooding the FCC with comments because John Oliver told them to, maybe net neutrality would have become permanent, but instead it shifted as the FCC did.
So it's just a less durable way of seeking these changes because of the way the FCC ping-pongs back and forth.
Right. I'm going to leave the last word on this to Will. He also said this. To me, this is a story about how a small group of organizations learned to weaponize public attention and regulatory capture to achieve policy goals that couldn't survive the legislative process. It's about how the modern administrative state became a battlefield for competing visions of information control, with both sides learning that viral moments and coordinated pressure campaigns could override traditional democratic deliberation. But most importantly, it's about the first major political movement to discover the power of mobilizing online outrage. So there you have it, Jesse. Many hours later, and basically where I land on this is that in many ways, the net neutrality wars were a gigantic waste of time and energy. But on the other hand, we got 2 podcasts out of it. And I would say that is worth several million comments to the FCC.
We did. Thank God for that. Well, thank you, Katie. That's like a really complicated subject.
Yes, it's so complicated. I feel, I think a little bit smarter now. I want to thank Will Reinhardt. He is like instrumental in helping me understand this. And also Timothy B. Lee, who also was great help.
This has been Blocked Reported. As always, we are produced with help from Jessica the 80s Baby. Thank you for listening and goodbye. I hope this isn't throttled.
Bye.